One of the things you find about ecology in general and environmentalism in general is that it is probably the road that has the best intentions that have the most confusion around them. And it's just part of what we've had to do for the last really 2 decades is clean up well-intentioned but naive assumptions about what is Gaia, what is the environment, what is men and women's relationship to the planet. And the initial first response, things like the Great Web of Life, for example, they just seem to make sense until you look at them closely and it starts to fall apart all over the place. So we have to come back and really do a much more sophisticated look at human beings, their development, their relationship to the planet, their relationship to systems, what systems are, what systems theory is, and so on. And the more you look at it in just a very, very careful way, it seems very complicated at first. You introduce quadrants and levels and lines and so on. But the more you do that, the more these confusions clear up. And then you can actually have an integral ecology approach that genuinely honors the fundamental truths of virtually every major eco-philosophy out there, while getting rid of, we hope, a fair amount of the confusions that are lingering. So if we actually look at any type of, in the best sense of the word, social change, including changing attitudes to ecology and sustainability and so on, the initial response for most good-hearted, good-intentioned people is to say, look, we have to do this in terms of environmental changes or bad things are going to happen. And so they argue in a rational way with facts and evidence, and they assume everybody's going to go, oh my gosh, you're right, let's start recycling, or oh, let's cut fossil fuels. And it never works. It just almost never works. So all of a sudden you have to, in order to have environmental change, you have to look at change agents. You have to look at human beings. And then all of a sudden you're in the whole realm of human motivation. Why do human beings do what they do? Including, why would they want to agree with you about helping the global commons? Because one of the frightening things you find, if you look at any developmental sequence in human beings, is that I'll arbitrarily say there are 7 or so rough levels of development, 7 chakras, for example. A genuine concern for the global commons and ecological ideals doesn't really come into existence around, on a 7-level scale till around level 5. So unless you have human beings at those levels or waves or stages of development, they're not going to agree with you. They're simply not going to be able to understand that. So we've got a lot of evidence on that. If you talk to psychologists, not to environmentalists. So if we actually look at the psychological models, and those of you who haven't seen them, I did a book called Integral Psychology. We took the world's 100 most respected developmental models and put them all in charts, and they all reached essentially that same conclusion. So all of a sudden it is a matter of interior growth. Now in part your job isn't to try to take a human being and grow them to higher levels, because that can take an average of about 5 years per level according to research out of Harvard. So it's in part it's getting real about why people would even be concerned with this stuff. And so general psychological development moves through what we call egocentric to ethnocentric to world-centric to cosmocentric. And it's only at world-centric and cosmocentric levels that people will be spontaneously motivated themselves to take these concerns on. Otherwise, all you can do is legal remedies. You can force people to behave in a certain way, and frankly, that's part of an environmental approach, and we'll talk about that. But in order to get people to pass those laws that will do that, they have to be at those levels of development, or they're not going to do it. So all of a sudden, what we call the left-hand quadrants, the interiors of an individual and the interior of a culture, they're not the only thing, but they're half the story. You have to know how to motivate people to take care of Gaia. And that's the problem that generally gets left out, is people that are working just the environmental side present, the web of life and there's global warming and we have to do something, and they think everybody's going to agree with them. And unfortunately, as you know, it just doesn't happen. So we have to get much, much smarter about taking all the quadrants into account when we want to try to initiate change.